I just want to kind of pick up where we left off last week, and if you weren't here, I encourage you you can go to our YouTube channel on our website renovate.now.com, and you can access that message. But hopefully this will stand alone without knowing what I said last week. But one of the things we did last week is my son came up and gave his testimony. He had gotten involved with drugs when he was 18. He sprinted out the front door and just kind of headlong into disaster, and he's since made a total recovery and is doing great. He's actually a worship pastor at a church in Castle Rock. But there was something he said last week that I just wanted to drill down into this week, talk about a little more. Actually had more I wanted to say last week about it, but we just kind of ran out of time. So I just want to drill down into one thought, and that was, last week Zach said there was this unknown thing inside of me that kept telling me that I was missing out. Something inside me telling me that I was missing out. You know, we cannot ever fathom how powerful of a motivator that is. There's this whole thing about FOMO, they call it fear of missing out. And I was researching that a little bit this week, and I'm not going to go deep into that or anything, but it's astounding how moved we are by what we think other people think. It's astounding how motivated we are by the fear of missing out. And it manifests differently in different people. In the young millennials, you know, they freak out if they can't check their phone every few minutes. That's actually fear of missing out. It can be. It doesn't have to be, but you know, you're afraid you're going to miss something. Or maybe with us, not millennials.
Generation X.
I want to be careful how I say that. Maybe with us slightly older folk, our fear is maybe not keeping up. You know what I mean? Not having what everybody else has, not being able to do what they do, stuff like that. You know, social circles, well, I don't fit in this social circle. It's a very, very powerful thing. Well, for Zach, the fear of missing out led to heroin addiction. I know you don't go from like good Christian boy to heroin addict overnight. It never happens just like that. Well, I guess it could with heroin because of the physical way it captures you. But for him, I'm hoping to draw a parallel to our own journey, because a lot of us, we know better than to go down certain paths because we've seen what happens when you go down that path. But I thought, what is it that motivates us to feel like we're missing out? What causes that? And I thought, you know what? Isn't that the original lie? Isn't that the first lie that led to the first sin? Think about this. So Satan appeared to Eve and says to her, first of all, he says, did God really say you couldn't eat from any tree of the garden? He said, well, no. He said we could eat from any of them except for that one. He said, if we eat from it, we'll die. And what was the enemy's response? He said, you will surely not die. God doesn't want you to eat it because then you'll be like him, knowing good and evil. And you know what? The devil, that crafty little thing, he actually was not lying. He wasn't lying. There was some truth to that. They would be like God. He lied and said, you won't surely die. But obviously, that was a lie. But he lied about that, but he didn't lie that they would be like God in that they would know good and evil, right? So then it says that when she saw that the fruit was good for food and that it was pleasing to the eye and for gaining knowledge, she ate it, and she gave some to Adam, and they both partook of what they were warned not to partake of. My point with that is this. They thought that God was holding something good from them. The knowledge of good and evil. That's the original lie. So how does that work in our lives? How does the fear of missing out work in our lives? First of all, what motivates that? So they didn't trust God. They didn't trust that God was good. Now there's two requirements for coming to God. It says in Hebrews that those who come to God must first believe that he exists. Like, because how do you come to something that you don't believe exists, right? You know. And that secondly, you have to believe that he rewards those who diligently seek him. So think about that for a second. He rewards those who diligently seek him. In other words, if I do like that Jeremiah passage that says, you will seek me and you will find me when you seek me with your whole heart. You will find God. But if you don't believe that he rewards those who diligently seek him, what is that? Well, that means he's good. That good things are going to come. So we have to believe that God is, and we have to believe that God's good. And I submit to you that Adam and Eve, their mistake was they didn't believe God was good. They didn't believe, they thought he was withholding something good from them. Now you guys, don't miss this. This is where he gets us. That's where he got Zach. I don't like my parents' boundaries. They're keeping me from something good. No, we're keeping you from disaster. And he had to learn that the hard way. But don't we all? Don't we all learn some of these lessons the hard way? You know, we think God's holding out. Well, God says, there's a million examples I could pick from. He says, don't sleep with anybody but your wife. Boy, that's a hard one in our society, isn't it? That's a hard one. So then men, so often, men, listen to me. It's a lie if you think there's something better. It's a lie. Dance with the one that brung you. It's a lie that there's something better out there. I'm not saying there's no woman prettier than your wife. But boy, if that's what you're measuring stuff by, you're going to be led down the wrong path. So, tonight what we want to do, I want to share this picture, this imagery that I had. So we were talking a lot about freedom last week and how humans, when they seek freedom, they so often end up in bondage, Like my son who was seeking freedom, and the freedom led to bondage. I should be able to look at anything I want on the internet. And the next thing you know, you're in bondage to that stuff. I should be able to do drugs anytime I want. It's so fun. It feels so good. And you know what? It does. It feels good to be high. Not that I know from experience. I do, actually. I wasn't born again. But then you're addicted to that, right? So often our pursuit of freedom leads to bondage. But then when God comes, and it doesn't have to be these blatant things, like drugs or porn or whatever, sex addictions, whatever. Those ones are actually usually easier to heal because they're so blatant, you can see them, they're there, and you feel guilty and stuff. But what are yours? What's mine? What's my bondage? But I had this picture of, then you get yourself into this bondage where you're like in this prison cell, and God comes and he pokes a hole in the roof of that cell, and he reaches down and he says, take my hand and I'll pull you out. Now what happens if you don't trust God is good? You don't take his hand. You don't let him pull you out of there. So when that happens, we're trapped. So tonight, we want to take a few minutes just to pray and ask God, Lord, is there any areas of my life? So Susan has some cards. Are we going to pass these out, or how are we going to do this? Okay, so on the front row here by the little box, there's some big cards. They're like 3x5 cards, but they're bigger. But they're not 3x5. So there's a few things I want to do in this time, and we're gonna do a couple more songs, but grab one of those things and write down what God shows you. First, what he shows you about yourself in the area of freedom. Nobody needs to see this unless you want them to. Then secondly, write down something that you clearly saw God do in your life at some point. Write down, we do not celebrate what God does nearly enough. So write down something, I don't care if it was 20 years ago. When, man, that time that God came through in this area, or this happened, or, Remember, every good and perfect gift comes from above, coming down from the Father of lights, right? So even if you didn't, oh, God, would you do this? And all of a sudden he did it, and you went, oh, that was God. Maybe it was not as obvious as that, maybe it was, but something that you're thankful for, something that's a testimony, you go, that's awesome. Do that. And then we're going to invite a few of you, if you're willing, to come up and share a testimony. Am I forgetting something? Because you're walking towards me. Don't. Oh, okay. So while she's passing this out, can I exhort you about something? I want to exhort you about this, especially men. Men, you are so bad at engaging. You are so bad at engaging. I'm speaking to myself too. Do you know what I mean by engaging? So often when we do stuff like this, the guys are passive observers. They sit back and go, oh, okay, when's this going to be over, or whatever. But God has something for you. You will seek me and you will find me when you seek me with half of your heart. No, that's not what it says. When you seek me with what? Your whole heart, all of your heart. Yeah. So let's seek him today. Maybe you're not desperate enough to seek God. Maybe things are too good. But don't make that a prerequisite for reaching out to God, because he'll give you what you need. Did you catch that? It says, I think in the Psalms, it says, do not be like the horse or the mule who does not draw near except by bit or bridle. In other words, don't be a stubborn ass. That's a donkey. I wasn't swearing. Don't be a stubborn ass. Don't only come near when I stick a bridle in your mouth and drag you here. Don't make me come over there. That's what God's saying. Don't make me come over there. No, we know the Holy Spirit's a gentleman. But he loves you. He wants you to draw near. Come willingly, because one day every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess. I want to be on the side that goes, I'm here on my own. I want to be here, you know. We forget that God is not just Savior, but He's Lord. He is Lord. He's the master of the universe. Us Westerners don't like masters. Right? All right. One more time what I want them to do. Is that what you wanted me to say? Oh, you want me to say what I want them to do. Smart aleck. I'll be here all week. Basically, if there's an area in you that possibly you sought freedom and found bondage, write that down. I'm not going to ask you to share that part, but write it down. And then secondly, something good God has done in your life. If it's recently, great. If it's not, then do it some other, dig up the archives and, but most of all, please engage. Walk in the Spirit. Think about that for a second. It doesn't say sit in the Spirit. It doesn't say lie down in the Spirit. It doesn't even say stand in the Spirit. What does it say? Walk in the Spirit. So let's walk in the Spirit. So physically, if you want to get up and walk around, do whatever it takes for you to engage God in worship and in these thoughts that I just shared with you. Okay?
Just adding to the picture that Greg shared, it's like God comes along and kind of like breaks through the wall of your cell and makes an opening so that you can escape. And like Greg said, there's that hand reaching out. Or it's like God goes, here, I've made a way. All you have to do is duck down, crawl out this little hole here, and then you'll be out and free. And sometimes the responses I see people have are like, no, I want to do it my way. I don't want to do it God's way. I want to do it my way. So they continue to spend time in their cell looking for another way out. And it's like, why would you do that? Or they go, oh, I don't trust God. I'm not going to go that hole looks dark still. I don't know, what if it isn't the way out and God's lying to me? I don't know that God is good. I'm going to hang out here because I'm afraid. And then they stay in their cell. Or sometimes it seems like people are like, it's not so bad in here. I'm okay. I think I'll decorate a little bit. I'll paint something on the wall and I'll just hang out here. I'm not ready to go yet. And then they stay for that reason. And you can go on and on with that picture. But our hope for you, God's hope for you, is that He makes a way to freedom and you actually trust that He's good and you take that way out. And we want to be a part of giving you that opportunity to experience that freedom. So excited to do that. So that's something that hit me when Greg was sharing. And I just want you guys to have an opportunity to share. So something that God has shown you, that you've had breakthrough in, that you wrote down off of what Greg said to ask God for, would love for you to have an opportunity to share. So it's really open. So any testimonies, anything that you would like to share. Come on up.
Okay, so I've talked about this a little bit before, but I'm going to put a little bit of a twist on it. So I have a little bit of a story. When I was in elementary school, probably third grade, maybe younger, I used to ride the bus to school and from school. And I met a girl on the bus who was my age, but like she kind of seemed older and stuff, so she was kind of cool. But so one day we were going home from school, and she came up to me and she wanted to hang out at the park. And I was like, well, we have like a park you walk to it from our house. And I was like, well, I'm not allowed to go to the park alone because it's too far and I'm just not allowed to. And she's like, well, wait, what? And I'm like, well, I can try to ask, but I'm not supposed to, so I probably can't. And she goes, you ask your parents to go to the park? Like, why don't you just go and do whatever you want? You're missing out on, she literally like said, you're missing out on the good life by not being able to go to the park without your parents' permission. And I was like, okay. And like, I just, like, to me that was like, she's crazy, no. So I went and told my mom this, and she was a little bit more upset about that. But looking back, this girl, she was able to do these kinds of things because her dad wasn't in the picture and her mom was a drunk. So they weren't there for her. The reason she could go to the park and do whatever she wanted and have the good life was because no one was there for her. And because no one was there for her, she spiraled and she did horrible things at a very young age. And that was because she didn't have rules. She didn't have bondage. She was free. So not only does this apply to people with parents, the Bible says honor your father and mother. There's 10 commandments, 2 positive ones. All the others are negative. You know, yet thou shalt not. One of the positive ones is honor your father and mother and all shall go well with you. You know, I think that is in place because our parents know better than us when we're kids. And we're just supposed to listen to them because we can't understand what they understand, and they tell us not to do things for our good. Now, when you move on from your parents and you hit 18 and you go to college or you just start a job or something like Zach did, or like we're doing, a lot of us over here, you are leaving your parents in a way. And a lot of people's inclination is to go, okay, so now I'm in charge. And they live their entire lives like that. They go their entire lives, they are in charge because they're an adult. And they die having lived on their own terms their entire life. And it starts when you're 18, it starts when you're young. I think instead of moving from your parents to yourself, I think you're supposed to move from your parents to God is in charge. God is your parent. God is the one you listen to who gives you boundaries because he knows better than you. We're worse than little children to parents. We don't know anything. We are so ignorant and so lost. And God is up there, created everything. We can't even understand our own universe, and God made it. So we need to treat God with respect. We need to understand that he really does know better. And if God isn't in our life, it's supposed to be tragic. It's like not having a parent in your life. Growing up with a parent is sad. Without a parent is sad. It causes people to go downhill. So growing up, going through your life without God is sad. It's a tragedy. It's not happy and I'm in charge. So, yeah.
All right, hey, I'm Chris. So I'm glad God chose you too, Marlon. So this is, I guess, about, I know Zach talked about last week when he was at a point where he needed God just to show up, right? He said, God, give me something so I know it's you. I was at a similar, I'm a very practical person, so I kind of have to see something to believe it. And I was living in Brazil at the time and working at a church, and I was a missionary, so I'm supposed to have it all together. But I still had doubts about a lot of things. And one day I'm leaving my apartment. I pull out, I stop at a stoplight, and then it turns green. So I try and go, but my car died. And so it was kind of a little bit of an incline, and I know I look like a pretty strong guy, but I knew it was going to be difficult for me to push my car up this hill. So I said, well, I have to do it myself. So I get out and I start pushing. I told this story to Jimmy last week. I start pushing my car, and it's not going anywhere. And I tried to push harder. It still wasn't going anywhere. Then all of a sudden, the car started moving. And I looked around, and there's like 6 little kids that run around the street all the time. And they're pushing my car behind me, right? I'm like, sweet. So they're pushing my car. I just pushed into this parking spot. And as is the custom in Brazil, when somebody helps you and they look like, they could probably use some change, I'm like, thanks, and I go in my car and I start looking around for change. And I get this big old handful of change, and I get out of the car and I'm looking around, there's nobody there. And there's a guy standing in the corner. I'm like, hey, where'd they go? And he's like, who? I said, all the kids that were pushing my car. He's like, there weren't any kids. You pushed your car by yourself. I'm like, okay, all right. So, if you've ever been to a church and heard somebody speak and left saying, I think I just heard a crazy person speak, this might be your night. But I literally thought, I'm going crazy. Like, they were right here. They pushed there's no way I could do it by myself. They pushed my car. And the guy's like, it was just you. And so I say that because I feel like there are always times in our lives that, where we think back and think about something God did, it's always God showing up. And I think, at least in my life, he always shows up in a way that is meaningful to me. And so I would just challenge you, if you're here and you're questioning or you need God to show up in your life, then just ask him to, because he will, and he'll do it in a way that's tangible and meaningful to you. All right? That's all I got.